Okay. Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's 3 prakim Rambam, Hilchos Geirushin, prakim Aleph, Beis, Gimel. First, we'll begin with the intro that the Rambam gives, that Hilchos Geirushin yesh b'chlolon shtei mitzvahs, achas mitzvahs aseh, v'hi, that sheyegorish hamegorish b'sefer, that when someone is giving a get, it should be done by giving her what we call a bill of divorce, and v'achas lois aseh, v'hi, so if a man was married to a woman and they got divorced and this woman married someone else and she's no longer in the second marriage, whether she became a widow, whether she got divorced at the first husband, this is not about a client. Any first yid is not allowed to marry her back. Now, Perek Aleph is going to introduce the 10 rules that are Ikir Geirushin min haTorah, relating to the bill of divorce that we call a get. Just for the record, the word get means a legal document in Aramaic, which is why you can have a get shichrur, for example. The word get is not only used in the context of the bill, the document of divorce that a man is giving to his wife when they are becoming exes, ex-husband, ex-wife. Nevertheless, when the word get is used, stam, we use it in reference to this bill of divorce. So Perek Aleph has 28 halachas, and the Rambam is going to introduce the 10 rules. He's not going to explain all 10 of them. We're going to take many prakim to go through the rules that will be introduced now in this Perek. Halacha Aleph says that Rambam ein ha'isha mizgoreshes ella bichsav sheyagiela. She can only be divorced by receiving what we call a bill of divorce. This ksav is what we refer to when we use the word get. And va'asada dvarim hein ikar hagerushin min haTorah be'elohein. Number 1, shelo yigaresh ish ella b'ritzoynai. He must give it to her b'ritzoynai. Halacha rule base. It must be effected through a document, through a written document, and look how clear, and not with anything else. Number 3, the document must communicate that he's divorcing his wife and releasing her from his domain. Mamash, if you remember when we learned the previous Hilchas issues, when the Rambam spoke about Kiddushin, and how the words that are used by Kiddushin also must be the opposite of this, that he is inquiring her, taking her into his domain, the get must express exactly the opposite. Number 4, the sheyeh inyanoi davar hakoires beinoi ubeino, which means that these words should express that they are completely severing the connection between one and the other. Not a little bit, but it's a complete severance. Number 5, the shia nichtav lishma. The get should be written for the sake of the woman being divorced. Number 6, that after the document is written, nothing should be lacking other than him giving it to her. Just for example, so if the document is written on something that's mechuber lakarka, and he detached it after it was written and he gave it to her, it will not be valid. Number 7, the get must be given to her. Better, he must transfer it to her. Number 8, he must give it to her in front of witnesses. This is what Chazal call Eidei Mesira Karte, not Eida Chasima Karte. Number 9, when he's giving it to her, the Tchayras Geirushin for the sake of divorce. And number 10, final, either he or a shliach should be the one giving it to her. And that's the whole Ilchas Geirushin. Bekitzer. Now the Rambam says, for example, the writing of the time, the fact that now midrabanan we do have witnesses that must be signed into the get, and the chayotze behen, and we're going to learn many other rules. They are all midivrei soifrim. Halacha beis u'minayin shasar l'varim elu. Hey minat toida, what is the source? The whole source of Geirushin comes from a pasuk that we have in Parshas Kisei, where it says, "V'hoyi im loisim tzachein be'enov." Let's break down this pasuk, right, phrase by phrase. When the Torah writes, when if there was a coercion, what we call the get mu'usa, as we'll get to soon, even some halachas today, however, on a biblical level, and even the Shaloi L'Ritzoyna was speaking on a biblical level prior to what we call now the Chedim that Rabbeinu Gershon, the Moed HaGoyla, with whom the Rambam paskins we have to follow. But we're learning that Rambam, and the Rambam Bechlal doesn't make any mention of it, and the Rambam is also speaking here the 10 that are Mido Eirais. Halacha, and even according to the Chedim that Rabbeinu Gershon, yes, this is a din Do Eirais. Halacha Gimel, the Kosav. Again, we're continuing to break down the psukim that we have, the words that we have in the pasuk. When the Torah writes the words law means lishma. It must be written for her sake. Sefer Kedisus means davar hakodesh beinoi lebeina. Davar hakodesh doesn't only mean that it should sever, but it's severing doesn't mean 99%. Severance by default means absolute. And how difficult that becomes, even though we already learned that Geirushin can be given al tanai, you have to figure out how that works. Well, when it goes into effect, there is nothing. Like the Rambam was telling you, he's going to expound upon this. This is the first one where he has to tell you, I know you don't get it, you have to wait until I explain it. The nasan biyadda. Now, there's a din of shlichus. So you can also place the get in the hand of her shlucha because that is kiyada. You could place the get in her property, lachatzeira, shahakoil, kiyada, as will be explained. Paradox is that her hand, at least, is physically her hand. When it comes to her chatzir, as we just came off the chasishus, kol mashakana isha, during the marriage, kana baila. So the concept of Gita v'yada boim ka'achas, that even though in this world everything is cause and effect, but the God Almighty, that's l'mayla ma'azman, for God, cause and effect can happen at the same time. And the Torah, which is an extension of God and godliness, is also above time and above space. So we have in halach a few times this idea, cause and effect at the same time. Next, v'shilcha sheyeh inyan haget, the word should be clear, shehu hamishaleach ha'isa, mamish the opposite of what we had by Kiddushin, in the positive, because here you're undoing it, and not, for example, that he's removing himself from her domain. Honey, I can't take you anymore. This document makes it clear that you have nothing anymore over me. We're divorced now. That's not what you're writing in the lashon of the get. Now, for this, the Rambam begins explaining this one. Ketzar halacha dalar. Kosav law, if when he writes to her the words Hadeyat mishulachas, you are sent away. Hadeyat migoyreshes, you are divorced. Hadeyat la'atzmich, you are independent. Hadeyat muteres l'chol adam, you are now permitted to marry any man. These words are the words that we want. Then Hadeyat migoyreshes. And indeed, the Rambam makes a point now to say that even though we're going to have the 12 lines in the get, the Rambam doesn't say that, but the word get, Gimel Tes, is at Emes, 3 and 9 is theirs. But the ikir of the get is the words, Hadei at muteres l'chol adam. However, Avalam Kosav Lo Eini Bailech, I am no longer your husband, which is what many divorced husbands tells their exes. I'm no longer your husband, but he's removing himself from her domain. Or Eini Yaruseich, Eini Isheich, Ein Zeget, because it says Vishilcha. He is sending her, and not he's not sending himself away from her. Or if he writes to his wife, this is not about him from her, her from him. But the words have to be words that imply that it's a get from marriage. When a man writes, if a man were to write in that document, you are now free. Now, she would tell you, amen. Yeah, married to you, it means I'm in jail. But bas choirin is words that are normally used by a slave, by a shivcha, and not by marriage. Doesn't imply sent away from marriage. And therefore, einoi get. Guys, I want you to say the following, just good to remember this. There are going to be many expressions when the get is not valid. The words einoi get means it's not a get, not even min hatoira. Get pasul means like we have a pasul min hatoira, it's a get. Midrabanan, it's not a get. And therefore, when the get is only problematic midrabanan, of course, she may not get remarried. But if she married another wife, another husband, she should not leave the other husband many times. Because then we're going to create question marks of mamzerus when biblically there is no mamzerus. So anyways, here, it's not even a get. Halachei. Right, that he will send her from his home. So it does not mean that if he did not actually send her out of the house, that means if he gave her get prior to her leaving, taking her stuff out of the house, then she's not divorced. It does not mean that. The Rambam says, when the get reaches her hand, as we learned above, as we'll learn, we're going to learn this in Perek K. Now, technically, guys, she's divorced, but you got a big issue over here, as the Rambam already introduces. And that's why the Torah says, send her from her home. Because she in Geirish, if a man gives his wife a get, a valid get, it met all of the 10 rules and all of the rabbinic rules. But she did not leave the house. Now, let me just add in between the lines. And if the man has yichud with her, and to make it worse, if there are edim, that there was yichud, and don't forget that if there would have been an act of bia can affect a new kedushin, and there is a klal that ein adam oise biyas nus, and if there's edim to the yichud, we say hein edi yichud hein edi bia. Ooh, you give her a get and you have yichud, even though he knows he did not have a relation with her. So then, Hareza can be Geirushin Gerushasai by Yichud, and he's going to need another get, as we're going to learn later. That's going to be in Perek Yud. So the Torah is saying V'shilcha Mikbeisai as Eitza Toiva, because a guy can argue, I can give her a get. We have a lot of kids. There won't be Yichud. And the Chanami, the Rambam says, if you give your wife a get and she received it biyada, she's Migoyreshes. But make sure. Most Bati Dinim today won't even give a get unless they see 2 different addresses. Because they know, of course, you can have my address, you can have your address, and we can have Yichud, but they're going to give it lachatchila when they live under the same roof. They're not going to do it because of this issue. Allah above. A lot more about that later. Right, because of the nasan, and not because of the kotzatz. The nasan, because it says because of a nasan. If it needs to be detached, now lefikach the Rambam says like following: if a man wrote a get on the horn of a cow, just for example, and he didn't detach it from the cow, he gave her the whole cow. That's good. Then there's nothing wrong with the get being written on a living animal. The problem will only be that if he wrote it on the horn of a cow and then he detached the horn after he wrote it and he gave it to her, einoi get. Guys, remember, einoi get means midoi raisa, because these 10 rules are biblical rules. Now, you can't give her mechubar. You understand? Even if you're saying that after we're divorced, this you have to give it to her. She has to receive it. It's mechubar. So even though the Adam signed on it, Eide Karte, Eide Mesira Karte, not Eide Chasima. So therefore, now another detail, we're going to learn all about this today. Today's going to be a loaded day. What we did is like this. There are times that in a village, there is no cipher. And sometimes it's not so easy to get the couple to the Beis Din when the get must be given. So we want that when the get will be given, it should not take up more time than necessary. I know that today giving a get will take either the morning or the afternoon. It's going to take a few hours. One of the solutions they had then, especially if there's no sefer, so you go to the Beis Din and they can't help you. Come back next week. And who says if they'll be back next week? Is at least to write as much of the get that one will be allowed to write, because it's a standard part of the get. Generic, and it's not specified for them. That's called the toifus. The toifus is the generic part of the get. The toirev is his name and her name, we'll see, and the day that you have to write in the Rabbanan, and that ikira get harei at muteres l'chaladim, which is taka also generic. No, but we want for him to be writing it for her. So the Rambam writes, "Ein koisvim b'mechuber lekarka," even the toifus I get, and that's a rabbinic problem. The rabbinic issue is that if you're going to write the toifus, you might end up writing the toirev, and then you'll do ktsitz, and then you'll give it, then it won't be good. If you violated this rule, and then utalashai, and you detached it, and then you wrote the toirev, which is the ikra get, which is because of shema ish v'hazman and and you gave it to her post facto, it's going to be kosher. In other words, the reason why the Chachamim said it's also is just the gezeda shema yichtoif the toirev b'mechuber. All right, let's get this going over here now. Okay, halacha ches. Kosav kol haget al ole hazurua. He wrote it on a leaf that was planted, but it was not planted in the ground. It was planted in this pot, and this vase, and this vase that had a hole in the bottom, a hole that was large enough for a small shoydish to go out, and it's within a certain height from the ground. Halachically, it's being yonik. It's taking its nourishment from the ground. It's considered mechuber lakarka. Now, even though he gave her the entire atzitz, so you go argue, it's like he gave her the whole cow. No, the get is puzzle. Puzzle means midrabanan. Because Shema, Gzeira Shema Yiktoim. Because he might detach the leaf and give it to her. And that's why, again, guys, like we mentioned, the word puzzle is not minat later. But he may write it on the vase itself. We don't say maybe he's going to break it and give it to her. No. People don't break vases. People take off a leaf. So the fear of he might do it wrong is lowered, and therefore it's not a problem. Not even midrabanan. Right. Halacha tes. Right. Another rule, another halacha. He has to give it to her b'toidas Geirushin because it says sefer kerisus, and then it says v'nasan b'yada, which means that when he gives it to her, it should be b'toidas sefer kerisus. Which means, what happens if he gives it to her b'toidas ushtar choiv? Or he's giving it to her as if it's a mezuzah, or there's no mindfulness, not because they have the right intent in mind, but because she's sleeping. And when she wakes up, it's already in her hand. Einoi get. Einoi get means it's not even good midorais. However, there's one, in the last case, we say the following, that if he gave it to her when she was sleeping, he gave it to her b'toidas Geirushin. And when she wakes up and the get is still in her hand, he tells her, then we consider that statement, just to know what the Gemara says, like a nesina chadasha, and therefore it's a get. Amar halacha yud amar la'edim ru'u get she'ani noisan lo. No, I'm giving her a get, and when he speaks to her, he tells her kinsi shtar choivze. The din is harei zakashin, because since harei yedias edim shenusan b'toidas Geirushin. One second, you have to give a b'toidas Geirushin, but don't we want her to be involved in that mindfulness? If she's sleeping, it's not good yet. But a wife knows when she's getting this document, he's giving her a divorce. He was pushed to shame to say those words. He's uncomfortable to tell her, I'm giving you a get, but we presume that she understands what she's getting. And we know that he gave it b'toidas Geirushin. How do we know that he has it in mind? Because he told the Eidim he's giving it to her as a get. Halacha Yudal. Hamigarish tzarich sheyomer lo kishitin laget harei ze gitech. You should say that. Hu gitech b'chayoytze bozeh. However, v'im nasan b'yad v'lo yomar klum, then we say it's possible because maybe we don't know what the intent was. That we don't know what the intent was. It's out of the blue. They're not talking about it. And the not all get. he took then the get and he gave it in her hand and he was quiet. How does it get caution? Halacha Yud Beis get the get is on the ground, and he tells her to go pick it up, and she picked it up. Or she somehow took it out of his domain, even though he said the words after she took it. Again, biblically, ain't a get, because he must give it to her. And not however, giving doesn't mean giving it the way you think. If he had it on his body and he leaned his body towards her, that means he made a movement which was bringing the get to her, not all the way. Or he tilted his hand, and he tells her while he's doing it, then it is a get, because he did an action that made it easier for her to take the get. And again, that's essential, because it says in Parsha Shoiftim. That's a different. We're going to a different Parsha now. Which means davar means, that's the rule of Chazal. Remember, ein davar shebe erva pachos mishnayim, and vihi efshar shetia zoeh hayoyim erva. Imagine, because she's an eshes ish, to the point that if anyone who has a relation with her physically, God forbid, will be a capital punishment. No, it can't be. And therefore, and how many edim? Shnayim edim, shloisha edim, at least two. So im nasan haget beinoi lebeinam. Even if he gave it to her in the presence of one witness, einoi get. Einoi get means not even menatoida. Halacha yudalad damet varam amurim. That it's not even good biblically. If the get was written by a scribe, if he wrote it himself, and there is one and guys, I want you to know, as we'll see clearly later in the Rambam, that even if no one signed it, I'll tell you why the Rambam writes one person signed it. But if he wrote it and someone signed it, then the get is a get puzzle. A get puzzle means that it's not good midrabanan, because you didn't have two Adam signing on it. So, for example, another application, because we said by get puzzle that if she married another man, loy seitze. Get puzzle means she's not allowed to marry a kohen, because midrabanan she's a migoreshes. But on a biblical level, it is okay. Now the point is, the reason why the Rambam writes that 1/8 signed it is because one would have thought the husband wrote it, and together with that you have 1/8. Maybe she should be allowed to marry someone else lechatchila. The vart is that if you don't have to aid him, even though there's 1/8, she also may not marry someone lechatchila because it's a get puzzle. But mitzat sheni, if a man wrote the get, we'll learn that explicitly later. Even if no aid signed on it, if he wrote it, mido'oiraisa, the get is going to be good. We'll get to all these details later. We're just starting. Halacha tezvav. Now that we keep on mentioning that what we need is for him to give her the get b'fnei shnayim, halacha yud gimel, because we paskin that the edim that are needed, as it says in Parsha Shoiftim, are not edim in the document, are edim that will witness him giving it to her. Nevertheless, independent of the witnesses present when he gives it to her, the chachamim were masaken that edim should sign the document. Takanas chachamimi sheyu edim chaisman alaget, and they can be the same ones, but we want them to sign the document. Why? For her benefit. Shema yitala get b'fnei shnayim. He might do everything correct, and he gave her the get in front of two people, and those two people died. Sometimes we say, and maybe, or they traveled, they won't be here. The nimtza get should be yada, and even though she's going to have the document, in those days she actually had the get document, and she's going to pull it out in the desire of marrying other men. Now, obviously, if the husband will be mute, we're not going to say that she didn't receive it in front of Adam, but the husband will have the power, right? If he wants to hurt her by saying, "I never gave it to you," and therefore it's going to be just like a piece of nothing, a broken shard. The husband will be able to be ma'ared. So once Adam are signed on it, he won't be able to say, "I never gave it to you." Now, make it clear, even though one is going to follow this rabbinic rule and have Adam signed, you must give it to her in front of two witnesses. They can be the same ones, they can be other ones, because again, we paskin, Eidei Mesire Karte, you have to give it to her. What makes the get is him giving it to her in front of two Eidim, very much like Kiddushin. What makes Kiddushin? Kiddushin is done when he gives her something in front of two Eidim. They are like what we call the Eidei Kiyum. You understand? Same thing by the get. Halacha Tezai. Chasma by Shnayim. And va'avar unasanolei beinoi lebeina. If he didn't give it to her in front of two witnesses, but there were two witnesses that were signed. I just give you, we have to learn Hilchas Eidos. There were relatives. Now says the Rambam, post facto, hadezek kosher. Why? Because now that you had Eidim written in it, and the get is yotzim etachas yada, how did she get it? You understand? However, I want you to realize how rare is it that the Rambam brings two opinions without him even saying which one is correct. It's also Bachlal, it's not common for the Rambam to bring two shittas. But we do have, Rabbi said this, or from the Go'enim say that, and I disagree with them. This is really rare. So in other words, the Rambam brings down this question, whether if there was no Eidem Mesira, we pass an Eidem Mesira card. And Chasima is only midrabanan. But if you have Eidei Chasima without Eidei Mesira, some people hold that it's b'di'evid, kosher on all levels. L'chatchila, she can marry another man. And then he brings down, other people say that it's puzzle, like we said. Puzzle never means that if she marries another man, she should go out. We don't say that. Even though it's puzzle midrabanan, she can't marry a kohen. She shouldn't marry she shouldn't marry anyone else because maybe she's not the midrabanan, she's not divorced yet. If she marries someone else, loy seitzi. But okay. And here the Rambam has this machlekes. He doesn't tell you who he paskins like. He leaves it open. Halacha yuzay. Hoye edav mitoich psulim. The opposite. The edem that you signed midrabanan, they were psulim. Or even if only one of them is puzzle and one of them is kosher, but you did what you should do. Edem misirei. V'nosanu le b'fnei shnei edem kshedim. Here the Rambam says, wow, a chiddush. You would argue, hold on. Guys, if you gave it to her without any Edom, she's Megureshes, right? You didn't follow Takanas Chachamim. But if the Edom are problematic, it makes it worse. Midrabanan. That's called Mezuyef Metoicha. You look at the document, you see the relative is one of the Edom. Her brother, his brother. Remember that? We learned in Choseidus Rishon, B'Rishon, Rishon, B'Sheni, Rishon, B'Shlishi, however you define Kerovim. That makes it possible. Midrabanan. Halacha Yudches, Hirchik Eso Edom and Aksav, V'Lo Shtei Shita, and other rules that we will learn in greater detail when we're going to learn about how to formulate, how to write a document. One rule is that the witnesses have to sign close to the document proper, because if there's too much space left, that gives the holder of the document the ability to add a liner in there, which is not going to be correct. He can make a condition. She can make a condition. So, and how much space must be within 2 lines from the bottom of the text. If you have a full 2 lines, empty puzzle, the kama yarchik so edim and aksav pachos b'chdei shitin kedei sheyu nekroyim imayim.
Sorry, is that the same spacing as the ketubah?
That's the same spacing Kevan of every other halachic document. Correct. And you don't have Eidem Mesira, so we're going to make it puzzle, right? Midrabanan, because the Eidei Chasima were not signed within too close enough as they should have been. But if there was Eidem Mesira, guys, don't remember by a get, you don't even need Eidei Chasima Midaraisa. Even though they're Midroi Chakim Harbe, even therefore Ve'enam L'Kraim Imai, or I'll tell you more, V'afal Pisha Einu Chasim all of them Klal. Hareza Kosher, not puzzle, guys. It's kosher post factum. That means the Chachamim did not make a problem, because the whole reason why the Chachamim wanted for there to be Eidei Chasim is for her benefit. Don't forget, a man can marry another wife even when he's married to his first one before Chedom de Rabbeinu Gershon. So the get is really a need of the woman. So something that's done for her, if you didn't have this detail, you're not going to ruin it. Hareza Kosher. The only exception is, like we said, if the Edom are Kerovim that are signed, that's called Mizuyef Mitoicha. She'ikir Geirushin of Edom Mesira. Halacha 19. When you give it in front of Edom, they have to know what they're witnessing. A man gives a mezuzah to his wife in front of Edom Mesira. They have to know what he's giving her. it should be read to them, and only afterward should he give it to her. Now, if he gave it to her prior to the Eidem Mesirei reading the document, as long as they know this was the document, because they witnessed it and they know. Karuhu, if the Eidim are reading it when it is still biyat habal or biyat shluchai, and they gave it back to the husband, but then there was a moment in which there's a possibility that he exchanged this document for the other. They didn't have their eyes on it the whole time. For example, he enclosed it within his hand. The point is that it wasn't his hand in a way that they physically didn't see the document the whole time. All these tricks. You can have something that maybe the husband had something else in another hand. You don't know if that they didn't see that for sure. Then it's better for them to read it again prior to giving it to her. But what happens only in the last case? There was a moment where they read it, they gave it back to the husband. It was obscured from the Eidem Mesirah's eyes. He gave it to her. If they didn't read it prior to giving it to her, that Rambam already said in the beginning of your test, they can read it right afterwards if they know that's the document. But prior to them reading it to authenticate, to confirm, it was thrown into the sea. It was thrown into the fire. So the Rambam says, Migoreshes. As long as they read it before, what are we saying? That maybe he tricked it, maybe he exchanged it. That's a chashash. That if you could resolve, you resolve. But if you can't resolve, you're not going to be chayish anymore. After this moment, now that you can't resolve it, even if he says later, trying to hurt his wife or his ex-wife, because they read it, even though they didn't read it, and there was a moment of it being obscured. They did not read it, and he gave her the get. And what are they supposed to do now? Now they're supposed to read it. But now, now it was thrown into the fire. Now it was thrown into the sea. I don't know why the Rambam changed their Seder, the opposite of Allah Chachav. Even though he's shouting, get kosher hoya, now we don't say that. Now, guys, I want to say like this, that what's the difference between get pasul and safek migoreshes? Huge. When the Chachamim say a get is pasul, see, we're very careful from Amzedus. Remember the rules. Eino get doiraisa. Get pasul midrabanan means she should not get remarried to someone else. If she gets remarried, loy seitze. Because since the Chachamim know it's only a problem midrabanan, now that she's remarried, could be she got pregnant. If you're going to make her get divorced and she'll have a baby, everyone is going to call the baby a mamzer. Guys, safek migoreshes means that if she gets remarried, yes, you force her to leave. Safek migoreshes is much worse than get pasul. Remember these words when we go through the series.
Get pasul, you're saying she's not divorced.
Get pasul means it's a problem midrabana. That means she's divorced midoraisa. Since it's midrabana, she shouldn't get remarried. She may never marry a kohen because she's going to be a migoreshes midrabana. But if she marries another Yisrael, we're not going to tell her to get separated. Whenever we say safek migoreshes, it's not ein get. She needs another get, but safek migoreshes is so bad that even if she marries someone else, we don't say stay married. No, maybe you are an Ashes ish. And if she gets pregnant, the child is a safek mamzer. Remember that. Halacha chabes. Zajac la get lachatzei.
You can't resolve it by having the first husband just give a kosher get.
Sure, you resolve it that way, but that needs to happen.
But then she would have to remarry the other husband.
Then she cannot necessarily marry the. No. She could marry him because if she wasn't divorced, she was never married to the other husband. If she had a relation, we'll speak about cases later. Halacha chabes. Now, guys, the concept that a man must place the get into her hand, we already said in the beginning. Her hand doesn't mean physically her hand. It means in the hand of her shliach, which is halachically her hand. It can be in the hand of her chatzed, which will become hers because of the divorce. So let's go into that case. But lebein hachavius, it fell in between barrels in front of Adam. Ubikshu umatzo, and they look in between the barrels, and when you know what they find? They find a mezuzah. They find another document. Ein choshesh shalom. means we don't even think she's maybe divorced. She's vaday not divorced. Because we say that that which you found is that which he threw. Why do we say that? Let me add a very important nuance that the Gemara says, because it's not common for there to be mezuzos or for there to be shtaros thrown in between barrels. So it's an umdana that what you found is what you threw. You know when that's true? That's only you saw one thing flying in the air. You found one document. So this is what was thrown. What happens if you go looking between the barrels and you find a few documents? So you see already that there was something there prior to the throwing. That makes it worse. That Shema gets Zajac, but it was thrown. So 1 second. On one hand, guys, we say it's not a get, but maybe it was a get. He's saying it was a get. So at least one of them should be a get. We say maybe an achbar dragged it away. So it's the worst of both worlds. It's safek migoreshes, as we explained. Even though again it's only midrabanan. They have to know how to read and sign. What we want is for them to know what they are signing on. Now, if they don't know how to read, one can read that which it says, and they can sign with one precondition. They must know what the language the get was written in, which means that if the one who is reading it is really translating it, that's called aid mi pi aid. If they're reading it, even though the aid did not write it, that's good. Amazing. But if you're translating it for the aid, that's not good. Aid mi pi aid. If they don't know how to sign. So one solution is that you either they read it or it's read for them. Someone should make the letters of their signature, their name, but with spittle, which in a few moments will completely evaporate, and they trace on top of it. The Rambam says that is not accepted in any other document other than in the get. Nachamol, Eide Karte, Eide Mesira Karte, not Eide Chasima. Eide Chasima is only needed in the Rabbanon, so they were lenient. The Einosim came to Shtarais because this is a leniency. Shekila Begitei Anoshim Kadesh Lo Yu B'Nois Yisrael Agunais. Hoylach Sima so Eide Meget is only Medevreim, as we explained, because really Eide Mesira Karte. Halacha Chavdal. Afa Pisha Chasima so Eide Meget is only Midrabanon. Again, nevertheless, this kino Sheyu Hoedem Mifarshim Shemoiseyim Baget. They should sign their actual names in the documents. You know how people used to sign before it? They would sign, "I am the aid." And the aid, and then, if need be, you would have to find someone that would recognize their writing if there would be a need to go and find them. But they said, no, so don't do that. Write the name. The both witnesses have to sign one in front of the other. And to the point that the im chas muzeh how does it get puzzled? How powerful is that? Even though we learned above that what the Rambam had a question mark, right? If the Edom were not kosher, right? No. Leave it because if Edom are puzzle, it's mezuyis b'toichai. So it's a puzzle. Very good. Another takonas chachamim sheyichtav zman baget. They should write the zman. They should write the location, like all other documents. Let me say this out by heart, not right now. Why do you have to do that? Imagine a man who divorces his wife. The example that we give is if a man marries his relative, like his niece, he's going to love her even though he divorces her. Truth can be told. It can happen by any other divorced couple at Shaykh, that the man still has feelings for her. And therefore, what happens if a woman is mizana and there's Edom, Sanhedrin, they're going to judge her, they're going to kill her. She didn't get chenek. She was an Eishes Ish. So he's going to give her a get. She was mizana on Sunday. He'll give her a get on Tuesday. If there would not be a zman in the document, she's going to come to base and she's going to say, I'm no longer an Eishes Ish. Okay. Shema, tia ishtay kreva. Krevasi means just an example as why a man would care to protect his ex-wife, even though it's an ex-wife. V'tizne, and she'll, God forbid, do zanus while she's married. And what will he do to save her? V'yichtav lo get acher asanus, v'yitan lo, and v'im lo yeh boizman, as it was midinei Torah, then she will be able to say that prior to my act of zunus, I already got divorced. And the fikach tiknu zman bagitin halacha chafei geitche yesh olav edim, but the ein boizman, you didn't follow this rabbinic rule, or you made it a get mugdam, a predated document or a post-dated document, or the signing was not done on the same date of when the document was written. But that's not the way it should work. The Edom should chasma on the same day that's written in the document. As I get the Yerushalayim, and they wrote the wrong makkah because of the Lord. Kol elu psulim. Psulim means midrabanan. Again, you would argue that maybe since midoraisa it's not needed, it's such a strong derabanan that if you did not do it, it's takapasul midrabanan. Ashi yachtemu by bisman ksivasi b'makim kisivas. Halacha chavav. The man, if the get had this makim hazman, and guys, just for the record, the makim hazman is in the beginning of the document, and then that was torn off the document. Chatach mimenu hazman unusanuloi diget. Here, the advantage is that everyone knows that something was torn off. You can see it. Oy shalei kasav shem hayoim. Or if the zman was vague, it wasn't precise, which is not ideal, but there was some time written into it, which is instead of writing the day, you wrote the month, right? It was the week, the first chodesh Menachem, the first week of Menachem, or shniya mechodesh ploni. Or you didn't even specify the week of the month, you only specified the month. Or even worse, you only specified the year of the Shemitah, even though you didn't mention the month. Or if you only specified what Shemitah cycle you're in, all of these cases, even though since it's only midrabanan, and in the case where if the woman would be mezana at the end of one Shemitah, and you would write the document in the beginning of the new Shemitah, she would not be able to protect herself. So post facto, they said it's okay. If he only writes hayoim gerashtia, only those words, it's kosher. Kimashmo'oi hayoim hazeh sheyotzabai again. Now, guys, don't forget Edom Mesida. There's going to be Edom Mesida, even though sometimes the Edom Mesida can go away. But it's shayich to clarify today. Find out when it was given, and then you'll know what the hayoim is. These are not lachatchila dikates, but don't forget writing the date is only midrabanan, and that's good enough. That when you write the date, you are allowed to use the Goyish date. Actually, they made it takana for Sholem Malchus to dafka write the non-Jewish date because of Sholem Malchus. For example, if they didn't write the current government, but they wrote it to another government, or they wrote it the date from when the second temple was built, or from when the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. So I guess it's good enough, kosher. But the im ein dar kam live nice boy, then midrabanan it's possible. And guys, I want you to know that it's possible. They made it mamish like before we learned if you wrote up the year of the Shemitah, it's okay. Here they said it's already midrabanan possible because they really felt that this can cause political problems. They're also for our safety. They were goyim. It was good for the Yidden that the goyim knew that when we write documents, we're machabed them. We take into account their malchus and not the way they claim that Jews are not loyal. We're loyal to God, which we are, and to the Torah, which we are. But we're not loyal to the local government. If they're not contradicting the Torah, we're loyal to the local government. No, it's not a stira. They wouldn't only write, when you're living in those kingdoms and dictatorships, they would write the date of the king, and they would also write the year from when God created the world. Or another norm by the Jewish peoples that we would write documents, Lamalchus Alexandris Mugdan, Shuminyan Shtarais, as we have in Masechtas of Avodah Daf Yud, just to know that Alexandrian Mugdan, or Alexander the Great, his reign is documented from year 3450 from the creation of the world, right? Which is, I think it's 210 years, what they're going to call BCE, which is now we're in Tavshin Pei Beis, that's 2,232 years ago. Okay. The Im Kosa, that means many Yidden would have such a minute. They would write in 2,232nd year, Lamalchus, Alexander, what's it?
I don't know, are we in 2022?
We're in 2022.
Is that what this is? It's 200 years ago.
No, I'm just saying that we are in year 5782. And Alexander Mugdan became a king in year 3,450. If Rabbi Shem will be here, he would correct me or not. If he only wrote the get according to the locals, right, the way the guy would write it today in year 2022, that's kosher. That's fine. Final halacha chavches. So he gave that request, and we're going to learn a lot about this, my friends, in the next Pedic. That's a valid statement. But they didn't do it right away. Days, years. Or they wrote a get, but for some reason the get was not valid, and they have to write another get, but they're writing the other get after many years, as we will learn again all of these pratim in the next Pedic. So now the question is, what location do they write? What zman do they write? They don't write it from when the husband gave them the instruction. They write it from when they actually wrote the current get. Zman haksiva umake maksiva, and not zman she'amalam abal boy kisvu, and not the place in where they got that rishoyon. For example, that if when people are in Yerushalayim, a man tells to Edom in the month of Tishrei, and he tells them, as we just learned, kisvu v'chismu utunu. But they ended up doing it 6 months later, and they did it in the city of Lud. So you have to write not Tishrei, where they got the Rishoyin. You write Nisan, and you write in Belud, because Shesham Nichtav Haget, as is the rule in all other documents. Gavaldik. Moving on, Pedic Beis is going to be speaking about the writing and the giving of the get. Many scenarios where a husband appoints people to write the get on his behalf, or to write and sign and give, with a lot of nuance as what must he say, what might be understood from what he said in certain circumstances. And we're going to have at the end of Pedic Beis the famous halacha that Rabbi made it famous, that even though one of the 10 rules is that a man must give the get only by his consent, if the Torah paskins that he must give his wife a divorce, once there's such a psak din, then koifen oisoi achayomer roitzaani. That's going to be the final halacha. Pedic Beis has 20 halachas. Let's begin with halacha aleph. Says the Rambam. Session about Torah v'kosav lo sefer krisus v'nosam biyadom means echad hakosav biyadoi. He, of course, can write it himself. And we learned in the previous chapter that there is biblically an advantage when he writes the get himself. Remember, concerning if two Edom did not sign it, rabbinically, because biblically, Edom is seated regardless. He could appoint someone to write it for him, even though the Torah says that he should write it, and also, no, it's give it with your own hand, or a shliach can give it on your behalf. And not that you have to physically write it. The Nasan comes to teach you that she may not take it. But it doesn't mean that you and only you can give it. You have a power to point a proxy. Here is Take, where one of the cases where we learn shliach shel adam kemoisei. Now, halacha beis. Let's go further. If he tells to people, kisvu get v'chismu utnu leishti, these are the words that are necessary. The writing has to be done only by appointment. The signing has to be done by his instruction. And the giving has to be done by his instruction. Guys, don't forget, if a man tells to Edom, write and sign a document, it doesn't mean that he's ready to give it. Could be he wants to have the get, that if he'll at the end decide to give it to, it's going to be ready. So an appointment, it has to be write it, sign it, and give it. Then, and that's the case where we say, another nuance. Here, we said that Edom is Sirei Karte, which is the Iker. So he never made a mention of it, but he told him to sign Gevaldik. Now, I want you to know there's so many other things in between the lines. We're going to learn later that Lechatchila, a Sofer should not be the one signing it. Over here, it's going to be okay. There's going to be other Edom Asira. We're going to get to those details later. To one Sofer. And then he tells Edom, but he did not say to give. Yet, in such a scenario, and that's the way we understand it. That he said to the Sofer, you write it, and you guys sign it. He also meant to give it to her. No, I'm sorry, take that back. The opposite. Since he did not say to give it to her, all they can do is to write it, to sign it, and they must give the get to him. And now,
He can give it to her whenever he
and
wants.
now, of course, because Vinasan, he didn't do it himself. He didn't. It's as if he wrote it. That's the whole word, that he has to say. Oh, we're going to learn exception soon. That we understand that he meant Vinasan. He was bohu, and that's why he didn't say it. But normally, every step must be a explicit instruction from the Mishaleach to the Shliach.
All that means that the date that you give it doesn't have to match up with what date it's written in the get.
So right away, very good, you're putting things together. So you should know that from when the date is written, the man may not have yichud with her. Very good. We're going to get to many pratim later. The point here is, that's the whole point, is that if he did not say give it, they give it to him. We're going to learn later what he may or may not do, but they may not give it to her. Halacha Gimel. The question get leish, afa pisha einish le'imay. He's the one doing the writing. He gave the instruction. That's fine. And makirin the yoiden, guys. There's makirin the yoiden. We'll speak about that more in a moment. They need to know and to recognize, like if a man is instructing, they know that in the city, it's called, they know there's a Reuven married to Leah. They have to be makir that this is the Reuven.
And
No, they don't need Leah to be there. They have to know who he's married to. But since she must not be there, they don't have to. They don't have to be makir in her.
it says that you should place.
I think that the words, the makirin, we'll see soon. You're going to see nuance. People get tripped up because they confuse the words makir and yoidim. It will become clear in a moment. Now, which makes things a lot worse. So you have to write midrabanan, the name of the location. Fine, you have to write midoy raisa, the name of the man and the name of the woman. So what happens if in the same lud you have two people with the same names? Then, there's a rule midrabanan. You need for both of these couples to be present, for it to be clear who's divorcing who, because Shema yichtov get, and he will give it to the other wife to divorce her, or the Adam will give it. She doesn't even know that it wasn't her husband that instructed it. And the get it's not from her husband. She's a married woman that has a get with all of the proper names. Halacha dalet. I take it back, David, and that's why makirin. That's why when it's given over by the Mesira, they know that this is the couple. It's not, you didn't resolve it by them being present. So what if they're both present? If the Adam that are witnessing the giving it over, they don't know what happened. Halacha dalet. Now, ubishas hasakonem koisvin v'noisnen afapisha ein makirin. Guys, it doesn't say afapisha ein yoidim. We're going to see that halacha soon. But makirin means they recognize she is she. It's her. They know that Reuven is married to Leah, but they know who Reuven is. That's makirin. They know, they recognize this is Reuven, and that's the Leah. Another din that the woman must be the one giving this charas sefer b'chol makom. I want you to know that even though the Torah says that he must give, which also means he must pay for it, eino chanami, the chachamim mipnei takanas agunois. Sometimes a man will use as a teretz. See, she needs to get more than him. He can get married without him being divorced, at least before the chayim. So she pays for it, but it must be his money because of hefker, bezdin hefker. The money that she pays, mitzad din hefker, bezdin hefker, was taken away from her. It's given over to him. So it's considered his money, even though de facto they're going to ask the payment from her. Today, in a base, normally you're going to ask for both parties to pay for half of it again. But here, normally in the real halachic rule, they're going to ask of it from her. Halacha 5. He must be the one saying it. He must say to the Edom Chasoimu, Hareisho Amroloi Bezdin, Oishnayim, Nichtlev Gatla Ishtacha. What happens if he didn't say those words? So the Bezdin asks the husband, should we write a get to your wife? And he says, Kasoivu. Im Kosvoheim Ma'atzman, Vachasmo Boy, Harei Zeh Koshem, Avalim Amru Heim La Sefer, Vekasav. But if you understand, so if they asked the husband, and the husband told the Edom, yes, even though they poked that instruction, but he gave it to them. But what happens if The Beis Din are the ones that told the Sefer, and he wrote it. The Beis Din was the one that told the Edom and wrote it. Even though they didn't give it directly, they gave it back to the husband, and the husband gave it to his wife. That get his batel. You understand? It doesn't work double. The Baal must be the one instructing the ones who are writing it. What happens if he tells 2 or 3 people? Is this one of those situations
where it's puzzle completely, or is it a suffix?
Get bottle, I think is get puzzle. Get bottle. I have to remember whether it's Doraisa or Rabbanon. But guys, that's because should we write a get for your wife? He said, yeah. But what happens if he tells the Beis Din, tell people to write it? It's much better. He's telling the Beis Din, tell the Sefer to write a get for my wife. Tell the Edom to sign a get for my wife. And v'omru l'sefer v'kasel chasaymu, or sha'amar l'shnayim imru l'sefer v'yichtov get le'ishti v'atem chasaymu. Then it's only pasal midrabanan. U'misyash l'medav zaharbe. Because maybe it's worse than puzzle. Yeah, Danny, a bottle means that it's biblically. That's what he's saying. So the question is it puzzle or is it bottle? What's the difference? I'll tell you whether the kids are mamzedim or not. Like we said, whenever it's a get puzzle, if she marries out, you do not tell her to get divorced from the second wife. Okay. Halacha zayin. Oh, shkoyach Danny. Oma bein puzzle lebottle. Shekol makem shemichav is a get you bottle. There you go. Bottle means like Einoi get, which means batal men atoyra. Whenever it says puzzle, it's puzzle min divrei soifim. Yes, halacha ches. Habal shevi get chosum biyodoi. He already comes to the Beis Din with a signed get, and v'omer, and he says to nu get zel ishti. Harei elu yitnu la. What don't we say? What's the chiddush over here? Chiddush over here is, that we don't say that since we didn't see how it was written, maybe he did not give the instruction for the get to be written purposefully. He's giving her a get that's not kosher for her to take the get and to get married, and then I'll tell her, you're not really this, and now you're also labal and also to the new. We're not chayish that.
Don't have to see it.
Very good. Omar lachedim. That's when the husband gives it. No, a second. That's when the Baal brings it and he tells them. And then we discover, the Edom discovered, the ones that were given an instruction. The get turns out to be batal midaraisa, pasal midrabanan. So what don't we say? We don't say that since you have to be appointed as a shliach and you fulfilled the shlichus, guys, once you fulfilled your shlichus, to do it again, you have to be reappointed. But since what they did was not good, even if it was only not good midrabanan, so they didn't fulfill their mission yet. And even 100 times, get kosher. Very good. We don't say that shekfara so shlichusam because they didn't do it because the get that was given was not okay. Write it and sign it and give it to a shliach to give it to her. And here they did their part. They wrote it and they signed it and they gave it to a shliach. Now, after they gave it to the shliach, we discovered the get was button. They don't have the right to write it again. Because here we say that they fulfilled their shlichus completely. See, if you made them shluchim legeirushin, if halachically it was not effective, they did not fulfill their shlichus. Here he told them, write a document and give it to someone else to give it to her. They did that. And they did it. And they gave it to a shliach and they gave it to her. Wow. We say, Safik Migoreshes. This is a question mark, guys, in Dinei Shlichus. How to interpret the appointment. Halacha Yud. Ha'omer l'shnayim, oy l'yaseh, al shnayim, kisvu get utnu le'ishti. And then he adds the words, gar shua, divorce her, shalchua, send her away, shabakua, release her, tarchua, discharge her, Kasvu get us utnula, write a letter and give it to her. All of these expressions are the proper appointment expressions. However, if he uses the word pitrua, pitrua is used by documents of emancipation. Get piturin. So in other words, even though it means dismiss her, par nesua, give her what she needs. Asula kadas, do what our religion requires. Asula kanimus, asula keroim, it lo yomer klum. To the point that the imkos will get to us no law. Danny, arei zeh batal. Now that we have it clear, halacha zayin, batal means batal min ha'torah. However, other expressions that the Gemara has a suffix. If he says hoitziyua, get her out. Izvua, let her go. Hatirua, permit her to remarry. Yanichua, let her be. Hoiluha, a sister. Harei a suffix. Im mashma milois elu Geirushin oyinyan acher. And therefore don't use it. And then because we get to an law based on that instruction, that's a suffix doirais. That's called suffix migodeshes. The imnosei, teitzei, the imtiseis, teitzei. Halacha yud beis. Ha'omer kisvu get leishtim. Harei elu choismin v'choismin, like we learned above. The noisnala bal biyadoi. If he didn't say give, that was the whole beginning of the Pedic. Don't give it to her. Give it to the husband. Until he tells them, get means it's garnished. A person whose life is in danger. For example, that means that something is happening very quick. You know, when a person is ill for a very long time, they are misyashiv in it, nebach. They have to make peace with it. When a person all of a sudden is in mortal danger, he's bohu, he's confused. And then we say that he probably meant to give it to her. You know why he didn't say it? Because he was bohu. Or hayotzev koiler. A person, even though he knew it's happening, but when they actually led a person in chains to their execution, dead man walking, that's a person who's dead bohu. But they're leading him away in chains. Once the government arrests you in chains, I don't know if today it means in handcuffs, it means in feet cuffs, if that's the word, or in ankle cuffs, or a person who's going on a ship. In those days, you went on a ship, you knew there's a high chance that the ship is going to sink. You have to know how to swim. Or if you're going out on a caravan through the desert, and mamish, when you are leaving, you get kisvu get leishti. Then harei elu yichtavu v'yachtavu and v'yitnu la. Shadavar yidua shel neschal ze ela lichtoiv v'litayin la. He didn't say it. His concern with his personal situation confused him. Okay, halacha yud gim. Bari she'amar kisvu get leishti and v'kasvu v'nasnu la, which they should not have done. But you know what happened? Right after that happened, he killed himself, committed suicide. Now, retroactively, we can argue, since now we know he didn't want her to be a almana. He wanted her to be a gerusha. There's so many advantages. The advantage is that there's no yibum what's needed. Or he did not want her. He thought he has something with that kohen. I'm committing suicide, but she ain't marrying him. I'm committing suicide. She'll become an almana. She'll be a gerusha. For her good or for her bad. But now we look back and we say he was about. So again, when a person is bohol prior to death, we don't say that because he didn't say give it, he didn't want her to be given. He wanted it to be given. He threw himself off the roof, or he threw himself into the water, right? Golden Gate Bridge. That's called, you know, it's called saying sometimes a man wants his wife to be divorced because he to her detriment. Same thing. If a guy goes into the roof and the wind blew him off, it's not a get, because you know what we say? He didn't want to commit suicide. And then harei a get. That's the premise. That's in other words, the presumption is if a guy goes on the roof and he falls off, even if it was windy, the presumption should be it was a purposeful act of suicide. Allah, God forbid. Allah, right in the middle of your giving.
The whole issue here is that he's only saying kisvu.
He did not say tanu because bohu. That's what we're trying to establish. Exactly. A guy is in a pit, and he says, whoever hears my voice. He didn't say tanu. Now, who? Sheyedu oisai. See, the Rambam doesn't say the words makir. Because b'makam asakana, what did the Rambam write in Halacha Dalet? You don't have to be makir. But you know what you need? Yedu. Because you have to know, a guy says, divorce my wife. If you never knew that Reuven is married to Leah, how are you going to do it? You have to know something. You have to know that there's a Reuven married to Leah. Now, you cannot see the guy in the pit, but you hear his voice. The Af Alpi Shehelu, even if when they bring him up, let's say he was in a pit and he was eaten by wild animals and he's not recognizable. Means you don't know it is him, but there's no hakara, but there was yediyah. Don't confuse one with the other. How do you get kosher? Normally you have to be yoidim umakirim because that's called shasa sakana, as we learned in Allah Dalet. Shezek shasa sakana hu shekois v'nois and afapi she'ein makirim. V'chein mishenaflei makas ra'ois v'yashiyich yebehem. Or even if a person, God forbid, had his neck cut already, and he was unable to speak clearly, but he was maramaz enough to say kisvu get leishti. And again, what did he not say? He did not say tunu. Now here's there's another chiddush. You can argue that maybe by the time they wrote it and they gave it, he was already dead. We don't say that unless you know that. Right? If a person has mental illness, and every now and then he's nuts, and every now and then, right, when the medication kicks in, he's okay. So while he's beginning to go into his mode of meshuga, he says, "Kisvu get leishti, lo yomar klum, b'pnei she'ein dato nechoino miyushavos." The chena shikir, if he reaches the level of shikrusei shaloit, kipshute, in other words, loit did not know what he was doing while he was doing it. That's the level. Then his instruction is worthless. But what happens if the guy is a shikir, but he's not on the level of shikru shaloit? Then he's a suffix. And that, by the way, this is a very difficult din because it's very difficult to get that fine line when you reach that level. If you ask the shikir himself, he'll for sure say, far away from that madrega. Give me another one. Halacha tezva. Omar kishu bari. Kisvu get to know ishti. When he said it, he was fully well. And then nibas. And then he went into his mentally mishuga mode. You know what we do? We wait for him to get better. The koisvin the nois nala. On the other hand, the ain't sarach lachzer uli malach by achash hibri. Furthermore, in kosva the nosan koidem sheyavri, then we say hadez apostle. In other words, minat Torah, guys. Since the instruction was given when he was buddy, minat Torah, it's good. The chachamim didn't want for this to happen, and it makes a lot of sense because we learned above in Allah Yudalid that if you are already beginning with this state of mental instability, when you just began in that, the Rambam says that it's not good. So they said, wait until he's well. Tezai. Misha neshtatek. Neshtatek means a person only lost his ability to speak, but his mind is fully there. Amrullah, and he wants to divorce his wife. So how do you do it? So he doesn't have to say the words. It's not the magic is not on the words. It's his intent. So they ask him, Nichta get leishtacha, and if he shakes his head, so what you do is you ask him 3 times. Guys, not the same question. Asking 3 times, you mean you ask 3 different questions that are not related. You know that for some of them the answer is yes, and for some the answer is no. And that determines that the movement of the head, when he shakes yes, he means yes. Well, in India, this means yes. You go to India, you'll get confused. You know, you have to make sure that remes beguf means what you think it means. Im amar alav lav alein hein, then arei lich leviyitnu. Utricha lebatka yafa yafa. Because when a person is unable to speak, you don't know what's going on in his brain. No, this is to determine not only, guys, that when he shakes his head, that movement means yes. You also want to make sure that it's not nitrifadata. If a guy is mute, not deaf mute, he can't speak. He lost his ability to speak, and he writes. Then a death mute halachically is considered someone of unsound mind. He is considered someone of sound mind. Does it
matter if the woman is crazy at all?
We'll get there soon. We're not there yet. Misha, no, we didn't. Very good. So Dovi is bringing up that Rambam didn't write chismu just to speak out. We learned in Allah Aleph, just to know that if the get was given over to her, then it's going to be okay. So okay, it's good. It's good to look into this more. Okay, halacha yuzay. Misha nasa isha kshu pikeach. He was pikeach, and therefore we learned in the previous series that the Geirushin is toifus. And now during the marriage, even worse, because you have to be of same mind, as we just learned, when you divorce her. As we had her before in Halacha Tezayin, when the Rambam wrote clearly that Datoi Nechoina. Cheresh is not Datoi Nechoina. Even though Datoi Nechoina Umi Yosheves, because he's deaf mute. Avol, that's because the marriage was Midoi Raisa. However, if the marriage to begin with was not binding Midoi Raisa, because he was Cheresh when he married her, it's called Hapesha Asar, Hapesha Iter. Then we got a Beremiza. Because since she ain't Kiddush Min HaTorah, K'may Shebiyanu, Uchashem Shekoin is Beremiza, Kach Moitzi Beremiza. Halacha Yudches. Hamachad is K'tan Al Yidei Aviyom. I want to go to David's question, just generally, since we learned in the beginning that the 10 laws mean that he has to divorce her, she does not need the Ritzoina, but she must know what she's getting. That's why we'll get to that later. We definitely don't need her willingness to receive it. He can divorce her min HaTorah before Chedem the Rabbeinu Geirushin against her will, but she has to be aware of it. We'll get to this soon. Now we're going to go to another case where Bachlal, the one getting the get is the father. First of all, to know the rule, if a man is divorcing her from the Kiddushin while she's still a Katana, the father has to be the one that's Mekabel the get. And when the father receives the get, she becomes divorced. What happens if they're Mikudeshes and now she's already a Nara, Geirushin Kishi Nara, so then both can receive the get. Imigia get liyada, or liyada via nisgarsha. Now, weiter. Ve'ein nara ma'oirasa oisa shliach lekabel gita miyad baila b'chaya via. Shliach lekabel she cannot make. But the father can make a shliach lekabel haget lebitoy hameoreses avada when she's a katana, even when she's a nara. Let's go back to Allah Yutes, Kicho via viktanom. And now the father dies, so the father is not here. All this is before Nesuyin. So now we have to know how old she is. If she knows the difference between a get and other documents, then guys, this is very powerful. We're speaking about a Kiddushi da Oiraisa. The Torah says, right? No, that's called she is aware enough. That's beginning to answer David's question. The imlav eino mizgoreshes. Achatavchin. The im Geirushin eino mizgoreshes. Well,
the father's not there.
Since the father's not there,
Katana has to be in a state where she can recognize.
The beauty is that if she could recognize, then she's migoreshes, midorais, and midarabana. She's migoreshes. Now, final halacha. This is the big famous halacha. Says the Rambam. So we just mentioned that a husband from the 10 halachis must give the get only with his consent. So let's go. Misha hadin noisin shekoifen oisel legarishes ishtay v'leratzel legarish. This is very important. No, it's if a Beis Din, from their ignorance, would coerce a husband without the din Torah paskening, you're mechayiv to divorce her. And he says, Reitzani, that's not the case. The case is where the din paskins, take, that he must divorce his wife. And there's such a psak din. So now that there is a din that you must divorce your wife, now, Beis Din Shal Yisrael, B'chol Maki means, not only ba'aretz, even b'chutz la'aretz. Ubechol zman means even nowadays where there isn't real smicha, but it's a Beis Din. Makin oisoi, achiyoymer roitza ani. And now that he said those magical words, v'koisev who get kosher. Now, furthermore, what happens if they hire goyim to beat him up, which is something that we should not do? But if that was done, it's also good, as long as there was a psak din. V'cheinim hiku goyim. And they're telling him, "Asay mashi Yisrael lemnim lacha, v'lachatzu oisa Yisrael v'yad hagoyim ache geiresh, oichet harei zeh kosher." Be'im hagoyim, because we don't want to have a minute where Jews give Jews in the hands of the goyim. God forbid, that's a terrible thing. It should not have been done that way. Ve'im hagoyim atzma mansu ache kasav. More than that. If there was a psak din, guys, that this guy should divorce his wife, but Jews, David, should not give over a Jew to the hands of goyim for anything, unless there's a safety issue. But they on their own did it. The Nakuda is that once the Beis Din paskins that a man has to divorce his wife, then if he says the words Roitza Ani, even because he was coerced, it's not called coerced. Since it did it on their own, so by the way, it's not good with Hatchila Puzzle, but again, remember Puzzle is so weak. Puzzle means
it's still biblically kosher.
Not only that, Danny, Puzzle means that if now she gets remarried to another man, we're not going to make her go out. Now the question is why the Lamalei Batal gets zed. That's not only on the last case. The Lamalei Batal means Bachlal, just because a guy says like Avraham Avinu, that's the Rebbe we spoke about this. Give me money for your meal or bless God. It was meaningful. Why? Why is it not Batal? Sharehu Anus, Baby Yad Goyim, Baby Yad Yisrael. She'ein Oimrim Anus, we only use the term someone was anus, someone was coerced. Ella lemisha nilchatz v'nitchak lasis davar she'enoi mechuyev b'min ha'torah. That's called coerced. If you were not obligated, and now you're being forced to do it, that's called you did something under coercion. Going misha huka ad shemacharei nasan. Aval misha takva yitzrei hara levatal mitzvah l'saveda. This is based on the premise that a yid really, really wants to do what God wants. Let's use Oisius and Chasidus. There's Chafetz and there's Ratzin. Chafetz is Ratzin Pnimi and Ratzin is Ratzin Chitzayni. The Chafetz, Banu, is always to do what God wants. And we're not even speaking about the Neshama, how it's not on the guf. That person, your Pnimius wants to do what God wants. Because the Torah paskin so. Elama, what are we lacking? You're a consciousness of it. That's something Chitzayni. So once you say Roitza Ani, not Chafetz Ani. You already had that before. Roitza Ani, now you did it. If I can't, you're not wanting to do what God wants. That's considered coercion. Now, guys, we don't take it to the point where we're going to stand L'fnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu L'din B'cheshbon. We'll tell God, I was forced to sin. Not ad kedei kach. God gave us freedom of choice, as we learned in Hilchos Deis. But in this context, we say, and now says that Rambam eng ze anus mimenu. Elohu anas atzmai b'dat. He was coercing himself prior to not listening, and therefore, misha eino roitze legarish. Ma'achar shu roitze liyasmi Yisrael. He wills an ayid. Wanting to be a Jew means roitzo hu laso is kol hamitzvahs. Wanting to be a Jew means he wants to be far away from doing all of the averos. It's only his Yetzer that grabbed hold of him. So, by the way, the Rebbe is Madayik, not Yitzrei was Ma'anasim, because Oines Rachmana Patri. The Rambam was not saying it as a teretz for me to sin. The Rambam was saying it to explain that since there was a Yitzrei who should talk to me, Shahuka, Achet, Toshas, Yitzrei, then we teach Geirish Leretzoinoi. How great is that? Okay, however, but if really the emesidin was he should not have been forced alpidin Torah, and v'to based in Shal Yisrael, or they were hedyoitas, and based on their mistake v'ansuachi gareish, how does it get puzzle if Yidden did it? No, it's not bottle, but it's not kosher. It's not good. Hoyel at Yisrael anasu yigmar v'ya gareish. Now, guys, we're not speaking about an individual. We're speaking about a Beis Din, but they made a mistake. However, here we already differentiate. Even though by the instruction of the Yidden, that ain't no get. That means it's garnished. Even though he said the words Roitza Ani, and Yisrael Kisvu v'chismu, and it was Goyim that Ansu, ain't no get at all. There isn't even a Reach get. That means that this woman, for example, if then this man dies, she can marry a kohen. Let's get moving. Pei Gimel is not that big. We'll have time, God willing, to finish it relatively within our time. Pei Gimel has 19 halachas. Pei Gimel introduces the din that a get has to be written l'shem ha'ish, l'shem ha'isha, or l'shem Geirushin. Says the Rambam, halacha alf. Kol get shenichtav shaloi l'shem ha'ish hamegarish. And it has to be written for both, not for one or the other. And meaning, even if it was written l'shem ha'ish, but it was not written l'shem ha'isha hamizgareshes, ain't I get. The Rambam is going to give cases, guys. It's the valdik. He's going to build it up. For example, number one, Sefer Shekosov get l'lamed. He wants to learn, or he's teaching, or he's slamed, and you know what? He did a good job. The get is actually written correctly. Happens to be that the names here fits someone who wants it. It's his name. The Shema Isha Keshem Ishtoi, the Shema Ir Keshem Iroi. And he took that and he gave his wife Einoi get. Garnished, not even, it's not worth nothing. Let's go more. He builds it up. He writes it. Halacha Beis, Yosef said. Even if it was written Legarish Istoi, it means it was written for a specific couple. Turns out that this couple did not want to use it, but another couple that shares the same names, they do want to use it. You know what? So we already have the document written. Also, ain't get at all. Even though it was written l'shem Geirushin, but it was not written like we said l'shmoi u'lishma. More than that, halacha gimel. If one man has two wives and they have equal names, Leah, and he wrote it in his mind for Leah the Gedoyla. And then after the document is written, he says, you know what? I'm going to give it to Leah the Ketana. Ain't a get. Even though it was written l'shem ha'ish, it was not written l'shem ha'isha. Halacha dalad. Now halacha dalad, I know it's late. Remember this topic throughout all the halachas. Yesh breira, ein breira. Breira means sometimes we say that there's retroactive clarification. Now it's going to get a little bit better. That will be the biggest chiddush, and it's only going to be a doubt. Yasser al-Kei. A guy, again, this man is married to two wives. They both share the same name. So when he had in mind Leah A, you can't use it for Leah B. That we said. What happens if when he wrote it, he tells the Sefer, I'm going to divorce one of my two wives today. I just don't know which one. So if you would say Bereira, so since it was never designated, it was designated for his wife, for Leah, his wife, later he's going to clarify for which one. If you subscribe biblically to Bereira, it would be okay here. Yosef al-Kain, Amal Sefer, Ksoif, the Ezer she'er Sagarish boy, and because of Sefer al-Dazu, and the Geirish boy Achas Mihem, nowadays it's something Geirushin. What happens if they wrote her name Shaloi Lishma, and then they retraced over those letters Lishma? It's worth nothing. Tracing over letters are ineffective. The only time it's effective, we learned it today, that since Eidei Chasimel are only Midrabanan, if the Eidim don't know how to sign and then they traced over, that will be okay. That's the exception. Misha Kasav Gate Legarish Sishtoi, he wrote it to divorce his wife. The Nimlach he decided not to use it, and on top of that, the Nesyachad Iman, he was with her alone. As we mentioned this today when we began today's Perek Aleph, the din is that's the Veshulchan Mibesa Loy Yigarsha Ba'oisa Haget Pam Acheres. You may not use this document. I know we didn't speak this case, but we were alluding to. This is an extension of that what we spoke about. What's the problem over here? He never used the get. Hold on, he never used the get. It's not like he had yichud. He never divorced her. The answer is the im gersha ba'oisa haget yoshan. If he gave it to her, hareizem igoreshes v'tinosa b'ilachatchila. Because what's lacking over here? Sharei nichtav lishma v'harei noisem la'ata be'edem kilchasoi. And guys, what did we also learn before when we learned that the zman is midrabanan? It's definitely not lechatchila, but if he gave it, it's good lechatchila because there is a zman. The zman we learned predated, post-dated, we learn about that. After the fact, it's going to be enough. So the problem is, if that's the case, what's the issue here? So he's not going to say only because it's a predated document. He's going to write more than that. He's going to write Shema Yoimru Gita Kaidim Levda. There's another michshel. The other michshel is that even though if a couple has relations out of wedlock, the child is not a mamzer, and even if, God forbid, the woman is a nida, that's the only exception where a person can be boil and isur erba, isur kares, the child is not a mamzer, but a child out of wedlock is called a pagul. So people are going to think the child is pagul because they were allowed to be married. You understand? And then she got pregnant, she had a kid. He's using a get that's predated.
They're going to use the date.
So they're going to think, a guy's going to look at the get. He's going to say, now I know. Now I know that she had a child out of wedlock and the child is a pogrom, and it's not true. Halachava.
contradicts himself here. Is the difference that he goes with yichud with her, or he doesn't?
No, not over here. I'm sorry, not over here. Here, he never divorced her. If a man divorces his wife and he's misyachet with her, that misafek creates a new kiddushin. Here, he never gave her the get.
No, he never gave her the get, and he went in yichud with her.
Yeah, and not more than yichud. He, if he decided not to divorce her, that means he's married to her. Halacha.
As long as he doesn't go into yichud with her.
No. After you give a get, you can be misached with your ex-wife. He never divorced her.
I got that. I'm saying if he doesn't go into yichud with her, he can use that whole get.
No, he cannot, because that's what we're learning. Shema yoimru gita koydem livna. Halacha vav. Amar l'soifer. Ksoiv get leplainus. Ksoiv get leplainus. Yeah, imi. Write a get. I want the get to remain in my possession. And lichisha eso eno agar shena boy. I'm writing a get prior to the marriage. Aside of the issue that we just learned, guys, in halacha hey, that lechatchila don't use a predated get. Aside of that issue, the get was written for her, but at a time that they weren't even married yet. The Geirushin ain't no get at all. Much worse than a halacha hey. Why? Because since she was not a bas Geirushin when the get was written, so it was not written. The halacha aleph on this pedic is it has to be written l'shem ha'isha hamizgoreshes.
After the marriage.
It has to be written when she's a woman that is divorceable. But if the get was written after they were halachically engaged, a woman that has kiddushin is a woman that needs a get if they're going to get separated. In order. Now, he's not giving it to her after the kiddushin. He just wants to have it already in his back pocket. That after I'll get married, I will use it for divorce. The concept of Geirushin kosher. Kosher, guys, doesn't mean lechatchila. Why not? Because, like we just learned, Shema yoimru gita koydem livna. That problem that Rambam is not minimizing. That's okay. Vital. What about if you write it to your Yavama? Now that we established that she has to be divorceable, the Yavama is a suffix in the Gemara. On one hand, there's a zika. On the other hand, it's not as strong as kedushin, right? The woman is mikudeshes that has a be'ilah to someone else. She's a bona fide eshes ish. A yavama that has a relation with someone else is oiven on a lav. It's different. So kosvali yavimte va'achashi yivna gerushin, and then Itaka uses it. And he's a son of Geirushin. Choyel ve'eni isha gemura. When it was written, halacha zayin. We mentioned this above. And play at the konas hasoifer. Takonas means to assist the soifrim. So when people come into a beis din or into a soifer, the get that they are requesting should be readily available. Hitiru chachamim la soifer sheyichtoiv tafsei gitten midoiraisa. There's bechal no problem. The problem is that gezeda. Normally, you are afraid that if they're going to write the toifes, they might also write the toireif prior to having a couple that appointed them, and that's going to go against everything in this chapter. But still, they allowed them lechatchila to write the toifes. That means all of the details, excluding shema ish, shema isha, the zman, the makaim, and harei at muteres l'chol and the aniach makaim o ish, o makaim ish, o makaim zman, o makaim harei muteres l'chol adam. At sheyichtevim l'shema ish hamegorish l'shem ish u'mizgareshes v'achar kach yachtemu ha'edim l'shmoi u'l'shma, and you're good. In other words, the toifes, the standard nusach of the get may be pre-written. Halacha 8. No. We do not do this now. Halacha ches, soifer shekasav get l'shma. Now, guys, I know here it says l'shma u'l'shmai. It's a mistake because the Rambam should be consistent. I know sometimes he's not. L'chayretz, soifer goes get l'shmai u'l'shma kil chasai. But the chasai made him shaloi l'shma. Let's go back to what we went to the Perek Aleph. So you can't say that it's Einoy get. It's problematic. It's puzzle.
What does it actually mean to be signed it?
They didn't know for whom it is for. They did not know who it's for then.
You just signed
Sign the document. I'll sign the document. And therefore, it's not bottle. Another exception. It's worse. It's taka get bottle. Second time today, it's very weird. The Rambam doesn't bring two opinions. And when he does, he normally says who he sides with. Doesn't say it. It doesn't say that over here. Oy shoy boy eid echad bolvat kosher. Afal pisha nimsa be'edim. Here, hadei's a bottle. On the last thing, guys. Maybe it goes on both. Because then the Rambam says it's only possible with the Rabbanan. No, I think here the Rambam is going to both cases. Halacha test. Maybe get. For Avad Mimenu. Think about this. Now that they said the get has to be written for you. You wrote a get. You know it was written Lishma or Lishma. You lost it and you found it. What's the fear? Maybe you found a document that has the same names as the one that you lost, but this one was written for someone else. And this one was not written for you. Just sharing the names is not enough. If you lost it in a place where other people are not hanging out, which lowers the possibility of someone else losing another get there. That's the get that you found, and you may use it. But if you found it in a place where many people travel through, so then it depends. If you found it right after you lost it, guys, there is avar and there is sha'a. Yes, avar, but no one lingered there. They didn't stop there. Or if you found it in a keli in which you left it, and you also recognize the look of the document because you know its width, you know its length. Again, even though that you found it the makom shahashiyoros mitzuyos and they were already oivros, you can get divorced. Halacha Not we're concerned, and we're going to learn other details that if you have a simon in it, we're going to get more details about this. Worse, you lost it in a place that in this place you know there's someone else. And you know what you have to add? And the wife is like your wife. You know that. That makes it worse. Then Geirushin Shema gets hanimsa shaloisha ishu acheru. Hoil va'avar adam sham. Even though we just said that it's not shah, but yes avar. Afal pi shaloisha. And to the point that if you divorced her, it's not only batel, it's not only a puzzle, it's worse. It's safek megoreshes, which means that if she married someone else, she has to leave that second marriage. Aval, if not even avar adam sham, even though in this location there's another couple with the same name, however, halacha yudalev, for example, the witnesses sign says, I remember which is exactly what's done today when a get is written in one city and it's being sent to the wife who's in another city. The Beis Din is going to make certain holes near certain letters with the pin in the get, and they're going to notify the other Beis Din that on the third line in this letter there is a neket. That makes you know this is the one. Not in the letter, but near the letter. Or the Edom say we only signed on one document with these names. We know that. It says Garish by and you found it and because once you have these simonim, or better, the Edom know we never signed on any other get with these names other than one. So this must be the one. Right? Two men with their names, with the same names, send their getting together. Can you imagine? And they got mixed up. Now, guys, if both Gittin are here, both wives are here, got no problem. Why do you have no problem? You're going to give both Gittin to both women. And you're going to tell each one, the one that was written for you is the one that we're going to use. And again, you take both of them and you give both of them to the other one, the Edom Esira. That's only good because you have both Gittin. The moment you lost one of them, then the other get is bottled because you don't know whether the get was written for her. Who's the her? Halacha you give. Let's go to Shemois Gittin. Now, guys, we are much more machmer than this halacha, but this is the ikar din. If a man has two names, you don't have to write. The Rambam says both names. You have to write the name, the main name. We're going to see soon that b'chlal the ikar din. You don't even have to write his name. You can write the name of the family. That a man from Mishpachas Rottenberg is divorcing a woman Mishpachas Vayel. Okay, but let's go. Isha that has two names. When you are divorcing her and you're writing her name, the name that they frequently use, the name that most people know them by, that is enough. And you're right, Ishploining. And now you know that he has another name. So you add, and all other names that he has. is being Megarish, Isha Poloinis, V'chol Shem Sheyeshlo. And more than that, really the Rambam says if you only wrote Chanichasoi, the Chanichasa, many people say that that's what it means. Chanichasoi could mean their family name, a man from that family. Other people say Chanichasi means what it normally means. The guy's a nickname. That's also kosher. We're very careful in Shemis Gittin. We don't do this at all. Allah Yudal. Kosav Hashem.
No, they don't. They do write.
Oh no, they write all the names in many ways. They write all the names. Then they write the name that is used. That is also called and also called by that and all the other names. Oh, this group. Halacha Yudal. Kosav Hashem she'enam yudum by. If a guy has two names and they dafka wrote the one that's least used. The Kosav called Shem Sheyeshli, but at least they added than any other name. Now we have a suffix Geirushin. But if they changed his name or Shema, not writing is a lot better than writing it wrong. Or if you wrote something wrong, ain't a get. Who is qualified to write the get? Everyone is qualified. Aside of the following five: a goy, an evet, a deaf mute, a halachic shoita, and a minor. Which means, afilo ha'isha atzma, not only is a woman qualified, the woman who's getting divorced, we said before that mitakanas chachamim, she should write. She can write it. She can write her own get. L'shmoi u l'shma. Yisrael shehem el avodah zara, God forbid, shmad, or it's mechal zos veresya. For this, we consider him like a goy l'chol devadav, and he may not write a get. Halacha tzai. Why not these five? Let's go one by one. Since you have to write, you have to have that kavana. So a goy, the first of the five, we say al das atzmahu kaisef. Chedesh right to the katan and a bnei das. And the eved, there's another rule. Since he's enoid the toiras get him the kedushin because he cannot get married, there's no need for him to get divorced. So therefore, he's pasul kagoy l'chol devadav. Now, the im kosav aget echad mechamishim elo einoi get. That means biblically. And even though you did it in front of two edim keshedim, because the dinam of a get is you have to write a document. It's not written properly. Halacha yud zayin, a few more halachas. Kosav echad menachamisha toifus. They only wrote the toifus, and they left the toifus, which is again makim ha'ish, makim ha'ish, makim hazman, umakim ha'rem d'chaladam. Then Hareze get kosher. Halacha Yudches. Mutal aniach chedesh sheite v'kotel lichtoif toifus haget lechatchila. As long as you have a gadol oimed al gabov to make sure that they're not going to write the toifus. But a goy and an eved lechatchila ain't koisven toifus lechatchila, even if Yisrael is oimed al gabon. Shelo yitiru lichtoif toifus haget l'shelo l'shma lechatchila. And that is resolved by allowing the chedesh and the shoita. You don't need to have a goy to resolve that, because if not, for takonas hasoifer, really, ideally, we b'chlal would not want for anything to be written. So when we're lenient, we put some limitation. I'll find out three written. I find a halacha yutes hakoisav get b'Shabbos, or on Yom Kippur. Now, what's the issue? We just said that a machal Shabbos is like a goy. But he did it b'shoigeg, and he gave it to her. Now, guys, I want to say it like this: a machal yom tov is not like a goy. A machal yom tov b'zodin is pasal le'edus. Here we go. Also, einoi migodeshes. Why? You get it? That's the problem. Even though they're not like a goy, but they become pasal edus. Kosvay the yomtav bizadain and signed, and you gave it to her in front of Edom Kshedim the yomtav. Since Edom is sire karte, the problem is the paslus and the edus. You had Edom Mesira. So therefore, biblically, it's okay. Elama. The get is puzzle. Why is the get puzzle? We learned that before. That Rambam says the concept of mizuyef mitoicha, because since you now chasmed Edom and this chasimas are not valid because they're puzzle, because they're a machal yomtiv, so therefore midrabanan the get is puzzle.
What if it was written kosher, but he gave it on Shabbos?
So then, even though you should not have done it, because you don't make a kinyan, that's right. Because